Bitch by Jason Bradford. Dedication. A bitch is someone with great strength. Finding and using your inner bitch helps you move mountains. Being a bitch is to be a leader and make a difference. Embrace your inner bitch and let it shine. This book is dedicated to some of the biggest, most powerful bitches I've known, especially my grandmother, my mother, my daughter, and my sister, Wanda, Elise, Courtney, and Tracy. I've watched mountains move because of you. Wendy, Catherine, Mary, Marilyn, Carol, Bonnie, Becky, Sissy, and Rihanna too. What an amazing pack I've been able to run with in my lifetime. Part 1. Bitch. Chapter 1. Cookie Cutter Life. There it was again, to his right, as it always was. The red digital numbers of Jack's alarm clock blinked silently at 5:53 a.m. He woke before the set time of 6 a.m. once again. He stared at the numbers. The red light that emanated from it burned his pupils as if they were red-hot numerical daggers. Nonetheless, he couldn't look away from it. He had invested his time for over 30 seconds staring at those damn numbers, and now he had to wait for them to change before he could look away. Jack realized he was waiting for the numbers to move up a minute in time. One more moment of the mundane, repetitive life behind him. He didn't blink. He wouldn't. He didn't want to miss that change when it happened. 5:54, there it was. The promise that something new could be 1 minute closer than it had been before. Jack was an African-American man in his late 20s, and he had lived in the small town for over a decade. He was athletically built and 6 feet tall. He held the same job for as long as he had been there. He had been friends with Tyler nearly that long, spoke with the same neighbors, shopped in the same stores, and eaten in the same restaurants, without change, without fail. He changed his attention from the burning red digital display of his clock that sat upon his nightstand beside his bed to the plain, empty white ceiling that loomed above him. It was dark and seemed larger than normal. Closer? It didn't matter. Jack felt the rut he was in and the unmistakable feeling that he was sinking into it. He longed for change. He was bored. Perhaps he should pack it all up and just move, start over someplace where new people and unexpected adventures would take hold of him and shake him into a world of mystery and fulfillment. How many times had he fantasized about doing that? Too many for him to count. Is that a new crack on the ceiling? He decided the crack had no importance, and he turned his head back to the nightstand. A 5x7 wooden photo frame housed a family photograph. While it was worn and weathered and prominently displayed a crease in the lower right-hand corner, it was the only photo he knew of that had them all together, his parents, grandparents, and siblings. Luckily, the crease didn't touch any of the faces in the frame. He thought of his grandmother, Wanda. Wanda was in her early 70s, Caucasian, with silver hair, thick and long. Her husband, William, had passed away several years prior from complications of influenza. They had been together since she was 17 years old. When William passed away, he took with him a piece of Wanda's heart, as well as some of her soul. Wanda was Jack's everything. He had no memory of his parents, as they both died before he was a year old. Wanda and Bill raised him and his two siblings as if they were their own children. Discussions of Jack's mom and dad never happened. There was a pain in Wanda's eyes that Jack knew was caused by the loss of her son and his wife. Jack wasn't even certain how they died. Wanda was one of the few reasons Jack lingered in his perpetual trance-like state and lay in bed. She was alone. She would die without him. Literally die, buried and rot. He exhaled, and he suspected that if he looked for it close enough, he'd see evidence of boredom in his exhalation, like a plume of hot breath on a winter's night. But he didn't look. The family photo was trapped in the fire-red hue that blinked from the digital clock beside it. He thought of his brother across the country. His brother Phil lived in Arizona, but also lived for nobody but himself. When their sister Leah passed away during their teenage years, Phil descended into sadness and narcissism. That wasn't a good combination to cling to, not good at all. Jack suspected that there was probably a bottle or 7 of Jack Daniels that currently took part in Phil's descent. Phil was a Caucasian and 2 years older than Jack. Leah was also Caucasian and the biological sibling of Phil. Jack was adopted and long ago stopped wondering about his real parents or why they gave him up. Jack lived a wonderful life with his adoptive grandparents. They were who he called family, and that was cemented forever. He was never made to feel different from Phil and Leah. He was given every opportunity, lesson, band-aid, kiss, and supportive action that his brother and sister had been given. Jack had called Phil only a few times over the past 5 years. The calls were always the same, short, cold, robotic, and far from inquisitive. Phil never asked what Jack was up to or how he was doing, and he only briefly inquired about how Wanda was doing, so Jack never volunteered any information. Wanda was the only living relative Jack and Phil shared as a connection to each other. 5:59. Now he had done it. It was a moment before the hour changed and the countdown before his alarm went off. He was imprisoned with the image of the 59. To look away at this monumental event in his life, the time change, would be catastrophic in scale. Jack smiled at the annoyance of the thought that he must witness the 6 o'clock arrival and the eternal obliteration of the 59. He deliberately looked back at the ceiling and closed his eyes. The alarm clock buzzed. Jack slammed his open palm into it, silencing it for the next 24 hours. Leah's image in the family picture looked distorted in the strange lighting that blinked on and off beside the small wooden frame. His sister came back to his mind, fast and furiously. Her limp body was found at a party. To add to the traumatic experience and devastation, her dead body was found by Jack himself, laying on a hard, cold bathroom floor, only 3 feet from a room full of partying teenagers. She had overdosed on heroin. Leah's death all but destroyed the family. It was a long road to recovery and acceptance for everyone that Leah had left behind. And the shock of her death was what hurt the most. A drug overdose from a 16-year-old honor roll student who had class valedictorian potential. She had never done drugs and obviously couldn't handle her very first attempt at them. Death proved that to be true. Why she had done them in the first place would never be completely understood. Leah was gone. Wanda was alone in her cul-de-sac house, and Phil was absent from Jack's life. Jack's cell phone vibrated on the table, and the sound was a muffled and hollow hum as it slid slightly toward the bed, as if beckoning him to answer it. Jack lifted it up slightly, enough to see who was calling, even though he had a feeling who it would be without the quick glance. It was Ginger, right on time, as she was every morning. The phone's beckoning to answer now seemed more like a dare. Jack grabbed the cell phone to turn the silence off. A moment later, a quick chirp to alert him of a voice message. Jack knew Ginger was calling to dispute their recent separation, no doubt. He had told her that they were not fit to be in a relationship and they should make a clean break. More or less, no longer be friends on any level. Jack was compassionate, well, as compassionate as he could be when he broke up with Ginger. Ginger had proven to be very clingy, controlling, obsessive, and a bit unstable. Disturbingly unstable. Jack listened to the message left from Ginger. She was adamant, as Jack suspected she would be. "We're not breaking up, Jack. You can't be without me. I'm your better half, and I refuse to let you go. And if you don't hear what I'm saying to you, I'll make sure that you see that if I can't have you, nobody..." Ginger stopped. What, was she going to threaten me? Jack wondered. Even Ginger was intelligent enough to stop speaking at that point, and she rarely stopped talking. If you're going to break in and slice his throat while he slept, she wouldn't put that kind of voice message into the world as evidence. Jack hung up the phone. The ceiling loomed once again with its new long, thin crack. Jack pulled the blankets over his head in anticipation of the day. It was dark under the blankets, warm. It was easy to imagine someplace else existed on the other side of the soft blue cotton blend blanket. That place, any place, would be more welcome than this one. He longed to feel the contentment a truly happy and fulfilling life would bring with it. The one bright spot in his life was his job and the people he worked with. Principal Richie was a little questionable, but everyone else was great. Jack loved teaching his third-grade class. His children, as he considered them, were talented and always excited to learn, especially Courtney, his prized pupil. Of course, Jack showed Courtney no favoritism because he didn't want to cause any ripples in the pond of equality within his classroom and the kids, but he did tend to beam a bit brighter when Courtney raised her hand or handed in a perfect assignment. He rewarded every one of his students, and teaching them all gave Jack hope and something to look forward to. Jack had pondered for a while why Courtney was different. He had come to the realization that what made her special above the other students he taught was her physical resemblance to Leah when his sister was around Courtney's age. Over time, Courtney's own charming and inquisitive nature is what captured Jack's adoration for her. Now, he rarely ever thought of Leah when he saw Courtney. Tyler was a fifth-grade teacher who worked down the hall. They had befriended each other very quickly. Soon they fell into a routine of jogging in the woods behind Jack's house every night, only to return for pizza and beer. Quite the follow-up to being active and healthy, carbs and barley. Sometimes it would be burgers and beer. The routine was twice a week, Tuesday and Thursdays after work. The forest behind Jack's house offered a long and private hiking trail that was wide enough for the two men to jog upon. It was clear of debris most of the time and definitely free of any other foot traffic during the evening hours. In the 2 years that he and Tyler had been jogging in the woods, they had never encountered anyone on the path. Today was Thursday. Tyler would be over for the carbs and barley. Then in the morning, Tyler would be off to Barcelona for 2 weeks. His class would miss him, as he was well-liked by his students, just as Jack was well-liked by his own. But the 2 weeks would fly on the wings of a hurried bird. And in 2 weeks, Ginger would be moving away for good. It would be silent and relaxing. He knew she'd continue to call him relentlessly. Long-distance relationships are mandated when you get involved with a psychopath who is forced by her job to relocate. Jack smirked at the idea of changing his phone number, but he decided to just block her once she was gone. Tyler had asked Jack if he wanted to go to Barcelona with him. It would be an escape from the wash, rinse, repeat existence that Jack was so accustomed to and tired of. But the thought of leaving Wanda with no one to check in on her left Tyler's invitation unacceptable. Jack flung the blanket to his left side, where it fell on his king-size bed. The rest of his bed was perfectly made, undisturbed. Jack stayed confined to one space, unmoving while he slept. He sometimes felt the bed was too large, but it fit in the room it was in, so why bother going through the hassle of updating it with a smaller bed? Jack got out of his bed, headed to the ensuite, and removed his boxers. He stood naked before the shower as he turned the water to hot. The water handle squeaked as if in protest to working this early. But the water jetted out of the shower head with a force strong enough to send a ricochet of water blasting from the shower wall on the other side. The fine mist hit Jack in the chest. It was warm. He stepped in the shower and steam quickly filled the bathroom. Jack stood under the flow of the water, enjoying the pounding pressure on the back of his neck. He stood there for a few moments before soaping himself up, working the lather into a thick, sudsy layer, and rinsing it. Jack stood still once the soap was rinsed. His eyes were closed and his mind was finally free from the thoughts of family and monotony. There was only the steam, the smell of soap, and hot water caressing his back. Jack's chest was defined with thick black swirls of hair that fell smooth upon his stomach, but picked back up below his belly button, creating a happy trail that he hated throughout puberty, but hadn't given much thought to since then. His arms were muscular and strong. He didn't have a six-pack, but he did have flat abs. He displayed a smile that would make almost anyone stop and feel a little envious of its sardonic beauty. He stepped out when he was finished, towel dried, and rubbed cocoa butter lotion on his chest, arms, inner thighs, and knees. He pulled on a new pair of boxers, dressed, and headed out to live another cookie-cutter day. From outside Jack's house, crouched in the darkest shadows, lurked a beast shrouded in thick brush. It watched Jack through the windows as he moved from room to room and from the second floor to the first. It watched him gather his leather briefcase and pat the head of an overweight cat that was perched upon the arm of his leather sofa. The sunlight was breaking through the sky as if slithering through an invisible crack in a porcelain plate. Pale blue replaced the dark, inky night. It didn't matter to the beast that stalked Jack. It continued to watch him. It knew Jack's patterns and activities. It had been watching him, waiting for the right time to attack. A ball of excitement built up in the pit of the beast as it placed its large, razor-tipped, monstrous hand on a thick piece of brush to push it aside so it could keep its cold gaze on Jack as he backed out of the driveway. Tonight, things were going to change for Jack, the creature thought. Change forever. It would be waiting on the jogging trail.